Good morning and good afternoon, and welcome to Kodiak Technologies webinar, Applying for FAA Grants, Funding Opportunities for Green Snow Removal Equipment. My name is Pete Costello. I serve as Director of Airport Operations for Kodiak Technologies, and I'll be your host/moderator for this webinar. Here's the agenda. In a moment, I'll do some introductions of our speakers and welcome you all again. We'll talk about the FAA grant programs, provide an overview of them, some other grant opportunities from other agencies, talk about the grant application process and some key deadlines which are coming up soon. That's why we're speaking today. Time is of the essence. And then we'll take your questions and answer them and make some closing remarks. So if you do have questions during the presentation, please put them in the Q&A function, and our speakers will try to address them towards the end of the webinar. And again, welcome everybody to this FAA grant overview webinar in our series of webinars. Later on, I'll let you know the forthcoming webinars in the series. And right now, I'd like to welcome you all and our speakers. And our speakers today are Cheryl Freeman. Cheryl is our consultant handling grants here at Kodiak Technologies. She is an experienced transportation and infrastructure engineer and consultant with a demonstrated history of working in strategic initiatives, multimodal planning, document development, and conceptual design of transportation programs and facilities. Our other speaker is Mark Manning. Mark serves as CEO of Kodiak Technologies, and he is a zero-emission transportation expert dedicating to transforming green transportation since 2014. Mark contributed to diesel engine product development at Cummins, and he has also led bus engineering for two of the largest transit systems in the United States, focusing on cost-effective operations and cleaner bus fleets through powertrain electrification. This is the Kodiak Technologies prototype that is being built right now in Idaho. This is a hybrid diesel with battery snowblower, and this is hopefully what will get you all to include in your grants as you're applying to the FAA and other agencies for green snow removal technologies and equipment. And now I'll hand it off to Cheryl, who's going to start on our overview of the grant programs. Cheryl, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. First, I just wanted to, before we get into some of the specific grants, we wanted to just talk about quickly the federal investment that's been in aviation. And specifically, a lot of this has come from the bipartisan infrastructure law, which is also referred to as the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that was passed in November of 2021, and specifically towards aviation. And as we know, that was a $1.2 trillion program overall, but in that is a 5-year, $25 billion investment in the aviation sector, specifically looking at the $5 billion towards air traffic, $15 billion towards infrastructure, and then towards another $5 billion towards airport terminals. So when we talk about some of the availability and the grants, these have been developed through the foundation of this bipartisan infrastructure law funding. Mark is going to go through some more specifics.
Okay. There's basically 3 FAA grant programs that we want to highlight for this. There's the Airport Improvement Plan. This one, I'll go in the details on the next slide, but this one has significant funding for snow removal equipment. There's the Voluntary Air Low Emissions Program, which is the VAIL program. It's due November 1st, hence the reason, as Pete said, that we want to focus and make sure this is aware for everybody. So you could put our Kodiak Tech as a potential product for this. Then there's the Zero Emission Vehicle and Infrastructure Pilot Program. And this is also due November 1st. For this particular program, it only is applicable to our hydrogen fuel cell and our battery electric variants. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see a table showing what's going on. So in 2023, there was $7.1 billion in AIP grants, 89 billion, since 2005. And the key thing to say is snow removal equipment is normally gotten through this particular program. So 59 million just last year, 658 million since 2005. It's due in April 1st, so we're not going to focus on that, but it is something to consider, what I'll talk about on the next slide. But the VAIL program and the VAIL program and the ZEV are both that can be leveraged for this particular program. Snow removal equipment's never been used, and that's mainly because there's been no product on the market. But now that we are developing a product on the market for this app, you can apply for this. So as you can see, there's somewhere, there's 16.7 million for the VAIL program, which is applicable to this plug-in hybrid variant that we've got. It's also good for our EV variant. It's also good for our hydrogen fuel cell variant. The ZEV is only good for hydrogen and our EV variant. And you can see, even since the exception, these have been going on since 2005 and 2015 effectively. There's been somewhere between 50 and 25% match. So the VAIL program, you can only cover the incremental cost. You cannot cover the base cost of the vehicle. And the other thing I would also say, the big difference is the VAIL program, you can generate your airport emission reduction credits, what might be important to your airport. Okay, so if we go to the next slide. So why is this important? So the one thing that this shows is, a lot of people are concerned about the cost of a plug-in hybrid EV or, hydrogen fuel cell being more expensive than the incumbent technology of a diesel. And we're just showing the capital cost. You're going to get much more savings on the operating costs because of savings in fuel. Obviously, there's savings in maintenance costs as well. That you're also going to realize, and we can go into that in more detail if you're interested. And so the big thing to note here is that for the airline ZEV program, right, your baseline cost for a diesel is $875, right? That's a dual engine blower that the Kodiak Americas basically sells on the market today, right? But if you were to buy the plug-in hybrid variant and you were to use the VAIL match, you're getting cost parity. And because of the way the grants, the funding is structured, you can actually cover that $875 through battery leasing, various types of leasing plans. And the other thing that's also available is you can use your AIP grant money to actually cover the base equipment cost. So you basically can stack your grant funding that way. On the right side, the one thing that's another part is that you could also do the VAIL grant for that. You'd buy it down to $875, same cost as the diesel. However, if you go with that airline pilot program match, you're going to get an additional $700,000, which means you just do the zero emission infrastructure pilot match. You'll get $885 plus the extra $700, which effectively makes that vehicle only $176,000. So, you're going to be able to buy this vehicle for a fraction of the cost, about 10%. The one thing I would say is this is very similar to what we were seeing in FTA grants when I was buying transit buses. And these grant programs will also pay for the infrastructure. The one thing I will say is the plug-in hybrid variant, you do not need the charging infrastructure to start deployment. You can run it just like you would do a Chevy Bolt without charging infrastructure. Once you get charging infrastructure installed, then you can start saving money by the charging instead of fueling operation. For both of these programs and all these programs, you can actually get charging infrastructure implemented, and you can get it at a 10% match. So there's ways to easily get this cost down. And the one thing I will say is, depending on the infrastructure you want, one variant that we would say is you could do there's a portable charger that one of our partners, Heliox, offers that we could basically get you for, installed probably cost is less than $100,000. And then when you talk 10% match, you're talking $10,000. So just want to show that the program funding already gets you at cost parity just from your CapEx, and you're just going to benefit a lot more from your OpEx. So next slide. I'm going to talk about some other grant opportunities that are there. And a lot of these are state and local. And I would say, we can, if you're interested in our product, we can also help find some other grants for you, or we can work collaboratively on this. So there's CMAQ grant fundings, there's DOE fundings, there's the Diesel Emission Reduction Act funding. These happen every year. And you can easily get a replacement for and all of our products are actually applicable to that. There's different funding, and what I would say is the way the fundings act. Some are like Vail, where it's the cost differential. Some are to where it's a percentage of the total vehicle cost, so it could be up to 90%. And then there's also state grants and incentives that you can do. For example, in California, there's this program called California Core that could be available for this vehicle at some point, where you get an extra rebate as well. And other states have that as well. So that's all that I have. And go to the next slide. And I'm going to hand it over to Cheryl to talk about application process and key deadlines.
Great. Thank you, Mark. We move to the next slide. As you just heard, there's a variety of programs specific to the aviation sector and trying to fund various projects and infrastructure. But I'm taking a step back here just to kind of go over, when we're looking for the grant funding, one of the most important things, and you've seen how many projects have been funded in his initial slides, and one of the things is yourself the best opportunity is to really understand how these grants are noticed and how they become available. And one way is to monitor different legislation, but most often through the industry, we see newsletters or other notification through grants.gov or other programs where you can get the early notification. And this is critical because oftentimes these grants don't have a lengthy timeline. There are a variety of different ones that are recurring, but there's others that are, the notice goes out and then the grant application is due. So what is typically done is there's a notice of funding opportunity, or oftentimes called a funding opportunity announcement, which is one of the most critical pieces that you will read to understand what particular grant program is a best match for your type of project and what you're trying to fund. Next slide. Specifically, this notice of funding opportunity or opportunity announcement really outlines a lot of the goals and how the intent of how these funds are to be used. There's specific criteria to be sure project could be eligible for one program or another. There's a lot of criteria that is outlined, and you want to align your project, because these are most often competitive. You want to be sure you're telling the story of how your project can specifically meet the intent of how those grant funds were to be spent. There's often in these, when you read through the notice, it offers guidance, often webinars, frequently asked questions, and different ways that you can be sure how you're matching your project with a specific grant program. And it also will provide you all of the proper registration requirements so that you can give yourself the best chance to make an application in a timely manner. And again, oftentimes there are some grants that are continual, annual, but there's other grants that could be within a month, or could be, most often we see a notice and then the application is due within 2 to 4 months. The grant application, just to speak to some of the grants require a pre-application or a concept paper. And oftentimes that specific criteria, those are small and they're in the notice to get to exactly what is your project and how does it meet this grant. But when you go into a full application process, there's there are going to be requirements in terms of demonstrating the benefits, addressing all the challenges that this particular funding program was designed to address in the nation. And then what I've listed here for you are some of the common things that are required, which would be a narrative to describe your project, putting together cost estimates, a benefit cost analysis, and all of these give the reviewer, particularly with the cost, is to better understand how you intend to use those funds, and also it's the basis of your funding request and how much you need for this project. And all of this, the way that you organize it is typically outlined in the notice, but you want to take extra time to make sure it makes it easier for the reviewer to understand your project by aligning with the specific topics that are outlined in the notice of opportunity. Next slide. So back to the ones that we were discussing with Mark. There are these 3 programs. Again, the first 2 that are there, require this annual rolling application deadline. And these do require pre-application once you get approved because through the pre-application process, then you would proceed with a full application. And again, these timelines, with a November deadline on the pre-application, you would be looking at a full application that would be due in early May or late June once you receive the notice. And then again, for the zero emission pilots, similar process. And then on the AIP, which we mentioned, you can use supplemental funds for those. A recent example was a notice was on April 1st and the application was due on May 2nd, with a timeline of being selected within 90 days and then the project itself needing to be done by 2025. All the programs have different timelines depending on how the funding is being appropriated and how that program fits into the national priorities. And now I'll pass it back over to Pete.
Thank you, Cheryl. Appreciate that. We're going to talk, how to answer your questions in a second, but Lane or Cheyenne, do we have some questions in the queue? I think I saw some.
Yes. The first one is, are there opportunities for airports to partner with local governments, environmental organizations, or other stakeholders in applying for these grants?
Cheryl, do you have some input on that question?
Yeah, typically, and if you saw in my components, one of them is letters of support. Oftentimes there are agencies that do go together because there's a mutual benefit for the different type of funding program and that specific project. So there would be, it depends when it comes to the airport and the size of the airport. And then in terms of the, again, reading through what type of funding is being achieved, you would could easily partner. And when you show those partnerships, that shows that there is a more ample support for that project to advance. Maybe Mark has more to add to that.
I think you got it covered. Sounds good to me.
And I know, Mark, on one of your slides, it said that you could kind of stack the things, right? Use different grants for different opportunities. And then that's just within the FAA. And then there's other agencies that might have grants. And to Cheryl's point, state and local folks as well.
Right.
Super. Cheyenne, next
Yes.
question, please.
Next question. What is the expected timeline for project completion once the grant is awarded?
And Cheryl, I think you mentioned that. I know one of them was by May 31st of 2025. You said the others depends.
Yeah.
Is that the answer? They depend?
Well, often we see this between 1 and 5 years typically, and I'm not sure if Mark has seen other timelines. One recent award, I've seen a 6-year timeline, but really, they want to be sure that the funds are used when they're as close to when they are appropriated, and realizing that some may require more design, more proof of concept, or different things depending on the stage of the project when the funding is awarded. But typically, and again, too, with environmental requirements, they typically like to have timelines on those because may change, so you want to be sure you align with the requirements at the time.
I would just say that for us, right, it's really RFP process, right? I would say is the big thing. For us, the way that we've designed at least the plug-in hybrid and at least the EV, there is temporary charging solutions that I deployed and advised on when I was a consultant and in public transit that could allow you to charge at least temporarily until you had a full charging solution set. So I think it's more the RFP process, and then we can figure out how to build per the timeline, if we're partnered in. And since, we're the only plug-in hybrid, we can work with you on that.
Awesome.
Cheyenne, next question, please. Thank you.
What types of expenses are covered by the grant, like purchase of equipment, installation, maintenance, etc.?
For
Mark,
these,
Mark,
Yeah.
I know you had some information there, please.
yeah, for these grants, you are able to cover the equipment, installation, and I assume design. Some of them, I believe, the zero emission plan actually had program management that you could get covered, and I think that was 10% of the grant award, if I recall correctly. So there's some things that you can get. Maintenance and OEM, so operating expenses are typically not covered in this. Warranty obviously can be covered because it's, part of typically the way you build stuff. So sometimes warranties can cover, I'll say, some maintenance costs, just in the way that they're structured. But yeah, it's typically capital costs that are covered, and sometimes you can get project management consulting experience covered as well.
Anything to add, Cheryl?
No, I think that's sufficient
Okay.
detail.
Super.
Awesome.
There's a question in the chat.
Yes. Do the VALE and the VALE and the ZEP require the same provisions as the AIP?
You know what, Cheyenne? I think it'd be helpful to go back to slide 9.
I would say they're I think they're slight the way that I understand it. Cheryl, correct me if I'm wrong. The VALE and the ZEV are kind of carve outs from the AIP program. So it's just an additional program that you would have. As kind of what's stated is all of them allow you to do snow removal equipment, right? And so that's really where the provision in all of them allow you to get it. It's just how much of the price of the vehicle you can get covered based off your airport size and what type of vehicle you're going for, right? So I would really consider them all somewhat separate because the VALE and ZEV are kind of carve outs of the AIP, and the AIP itself can help you reduce the cost of the base. So if you look at the VALE program guidance documents, it actually has snow removal equipment can be used. It says safety equipment, which is snow removal equipment as part of that, can be used as you can use the AIP funds and the PFC funds to cover the base cost. So because we're safety related, you can get it covered. Hope that answers your question.
Are there limits on the amount of funding that can be requested?
Well, I would say here, we're looking at millions of dollars, and obviously those go to different airports, different projects, and certainly AIP goes all over the country, as we saw earlier. Are there any dollar limits, Cheryl, that you know of for the requests?
Yes. Typically, there'll be an annual. They'll say there's this much available in the notice of the funding opportunity, and it'll determine the number of projects will be determined by how many applications there are and how they can look to divvy up that money. And certain, like in a couple of those programs, it's a certain amount of money, approximate the same per year over a number of years. So, and they continue to, try to. I'm not sure if. I think it was listed there. We talked about it. How much has already been appropriated through some of the AIP and the other programs for projects like the snow removal equipment. And we can most certainly provide some additional information after the webinar with some more details of how much each of these programs has funded already.
Yeah, and I would also state we would look. You can always look at past. I just did a spot check of the ZEV program, for example. The most they've ever awarded to one entity is about $3.5 to $4 million, right? So that could be, you could use that as probably a good baseline for the max you probably get awarded. But you never know, as it all depends on, if they only get one application, two applications, then maybe you can get more. So
All right, last question. Can small and regional airports apply for these grants, or are they primarily for those larger airports?
I know the eligibility is the NPIAS, and I think that includes both large and small and regional airports. Correct, Mark?
Correct. So yeah, if you're part of that criteria, then you can definitely apply for these grants. And yet again, if you are unsure or if you need support, we'll gladly talk through a project with you. We're happy to discuss our product with any of your advisors. We're happy to figure out if you're interested in it and these grants don't work. We're always willing to help you figure things out. And maybe there's ways that we can even do some financing, leasing, etc. Because as I said, the total cost of ownership of the plug-in hybrid and the battery electric should be much lower than the diesel version that's currently out there. That way, absent funding, we can always make it an attractive offer for the client.
Thank you, folks, for submitting those questions, and thank you, Mark and Cheryl, for your answers. And I go to the next slide for my closing remarks. And it kind of is a good segue from what Mark was just saying. If you need a letter of support, Kodiak Technologies will certainly provide that. We also have a 2-page technical green application insert that we can make available for your grants. And we'll go through the costing as Mark was talking about. And if you need to take advantage of any of these opportunities, you need our support for any of these FAA grants or other grants, please send me an email, get in touch, and we'll help you. The team here will help you be successful. We hope, because we want to be successful with you. And lastly, I want to talk about our whole webinar series. Again, we have this one today because of the upcoming November 1 deadlines for those grants. So hopefully that's something that some of you folks want to explore with us. We want to do that, but we have more coming in this webinar series. We're going to talk in detail about the prototype that I showed you an image of earlier. Again, it's being built right now in Idaho, being prepared for this winter season, and a road show and an appearance at the Buffalo Snow Symposium. We'll talk about electrical infrastructure needs, safety, automation, implementation issues, maintenance issues, and of course, environmental benefits for these technologies. And next slide, please, which I think will conclude our presentation and time with you all. Feel free to go to our website for more details. And like we like to say, nothing can stand up to an electrified Kodiak. Appreciate your time and attention and your questions this afternoon, and look forward to supporting you all as you go through this grant application process. Thank you very much.